We have an emergency alert activation at the Snowden House, Horseshoe Lake. Female victim, possible home invasion in progress. Units respond immediately.
The voice you're hearing is from a police dispatch on a quiet March evening in 2020. Inside the historic Snowden House in Arkansas, 63-year-old Martha McKay had just pressed her panic button as an intruder broke into her bedroom. Within minutes, she would be dead, stabbed and bludgeoned by someone she had forgiven, someone she had helped, someone she had saved. But here's the twist that will make your blood run cold. The man who murdered Martha McKay in March 2020 was the same person who had killed her mother and uncle in the exact same house 24 years earlier. Just hours before her death, Martha had fired Travis Lewis from his job at her bed and breakfast for allegedly stealing $10,000. What she didn't know was that this act of accountability would trigger a deadly return to the scene where it all began, where a 16-year-old Travis Lewis had first tasted blood in 1996. How does a story of Buddhist forgiveness turn into a double tragedy spanning nearly a quarter century? How does a victim's family member become the architect of their own destruction by showing mercy to a killer? What happened at the Snowden House proves that some people can't be saved, and that forgiveness, no matter how pure, can't change a killer's heart. Before we dive into this incredible story of forgiveness betrayed, I want you to think about this. If someone murdered your family members, could you ever forgive them? Could you visit them in prison, advocate for their release, even give them a job? Comment below. Have you ever had to forgive someone who hurt you deeply? Because what Martha McKay did next will challenge everything you believe about mercy and justice. If you think stories like Martha's tragedy deserve to be heard, then prove it. Hit that subscribe button right now. Not for me, but for every person who needs to learn the difference between compassion and dangerous naivety. This is the story of Travis Lewis, the killer who struck twice, and Martha McKay, the woman whose compassion became her downfall. Our story begins on September 10, 1996, at the stately Snowden House in Horseshoe Lake, Arkansas. This wasn't just any house. It was a family legacy, an elegant home with marble floors and sweeping staircases that had belonged to the Snowden family for generations. What they didn't know was that a 16-year-old local boy named Travis Lewis had been watching their house. Travis lived nearby with his parents, who actually had some connection to the Snowden property. To the outside world, he seemed like any other teenager in rural Arkansas. But on that September evening, Travis Lewis made a choice that would forever link his name to the Snowden house. He entered the home, and when Sally and Lee startled him during what appeared to be a burglary attempt, he didn't run, he killed. Travis fatally shot both Sally Snowden McKay and Lee Baker, a 75-year-old grandmother and a 52-year-old musician, murdered by a teenager who couldn't handle being caught in the act of stealing. But Travis wasn't done. After killing two innocent people, he set the historic Snowden house on fire, trying to destroy the evidence of his crimes. The same beautiful home that had housed generations of family memories was now a crime scene and a funeral pyre. Travis Lewis was quickly caught and arrested for the double murder. Despite being only 16 years old, the brutality of his crimes meant he was charged as an adult. The evidence was overwhelming. This wasn't a case of mistaken identity or questionable motives. In a plea bargain that would later prove tragically significant, Travis Lewis was sentenced to 28.5 years in prison. He was required to serve at least 70% of that sentence, meaning he could be eligible for parole after about 20 years. For the families of Sally and Lee, this seemed like justice. A teenage killer would spend most of his adult life behind bars, paying for his crimes. The Snowden house would be rebuilt, and life would somehow continue without the two people Travis had stolen from the world. But there was one family member whose response would defy all expectations and ultimately set the stage for tragedy to strike again. Sally's daughter, Martha McKay, was about to begin a journey that would challenge everything most people believe about forgiveness and redemption. Pause the video right here and tell me, if someone murdered your mother and uncle, what would your response be? Would you want them to rot in prison forever? Would you be plotting revenge? Comment your honest reaction below, because what Martha McKay did next will either inspire you or make you question her sanity. Martha McKay wasn't just Sally's daughter. She was a practicing Buddhist whose entire worldview was built around the concepts of forgiveness, compassion, and the possibility of redemption for all beings. When most people would have been consumed with hatred and thoughts of revenge, Martha chose a radically different path. While Travis Lewis sat in his prison cell serving his sentence, Martha began a spiritual journey that would astound everyone who knew her. Instead of celebrating his imprisonment, she began to see Travis as a lost soul who might be capable of change and redemption. This wasn't just abstract forgiveness from a distance. Martha McKay made the extraordinary decision to visit Travis Lewis in prison. Think about that for a moment. She voluntarily sat across from the person who had murdered her mother and uncle, and instead of expressing hatred, she offered compassion. These weren't one-time visits born from curiosity or closure-seeking. Martha maintained regular contact with Travis Lewis throughout his incarceration. She believed in the Buddhist principle that all people have the capacity for change, that even the most damaged souls can find redemption. But Martha's forgiveness went far beyond visits and kind words. As Travis Lewis's parole date approached after serving 23 years, Martha McKay did something that shocked everyone who knew the case. She actively advocated for his release. Martha didn't just forgive Travis Lewis. She became his champion, his supporter, his ticket back to the free world. In 2018, after 23 years behind bars, Travis Lewis was released on parole, partly due to the advocacy of the daughter of one of his victims. But Martha's compassion didn't end with his release. In an act that defied all common sense and conventional wisdom, she offered Travis Lewis something that would ultimately seal her fate: a job and housing at the restored Snowden house. Yes, you heard that correctly. Martha McKay hired the man who had murdered her mother and uncle to work at the very house where he had committed those murders. She gave him not just employment, but a home at the scene of his crimes. The Buddhist concept of forgiveness was about to meet the harsh reality of human nature, and the results would be devastating. After the 1996 murders and fire, the Snowden house had been rebuilt and transformed. Martha McKay had turned her family's tragic legacy into something positive: a beautiful bed and breakfast that hosted weddings and events. The elegant marble floors and sweeping staircases were restored to their former glory. For Martha, this transformation represented more than just business. It was a way to honor her mother's memory while creating something beautiful from something terrible. The house that had witnessed such horror was now a place where people celebrated love and new beginnings. When Travis Lewis was released in 2018, Martha quietly gave him a job working on the property. Most people in the community had no idea that the man doing maintenance and odd jobs at the beautiful bed and breakfast was the same person who had murdered the previous owner's mother and uncle. For Martha, this arrangement represented the ultimate expression of her Buddhist beliefs. She was giving a formerly incarcerated person a second chance, helping him reintegrate into society, proving that forgiveness and redemption were possible. For nearly 2 years, this arrangement seemed to work. Travis had housing, employment, and a chance to rebuild his life. Martha felt fulfilled knowing she was living her values and helping someone who society had written off. Here's a question that might divide you. Was Martha McKay incredibly compassionate or dangerously naive? She gave her mother's killer a job at the scene of the crime. Some would call this the ultimate forgiveness. Others would call it reckless endangerment. What do you think about her decision? Comment below, because what happened next will either vindicate or condemn her choice. March 2020 brought unprecedented challenges to the world. The COVID-19 pandemic had shut down businesses, isolated people in their homes, and created financial stress for everyone. The bed and breakfast business was particularly hard hit as travel and events were canceled. It was during this difficult time that Martha McKay discovered something that would shatter her faith in redemption and forgiveness. Travis Lewis, the man she had saved from a life of imprisonment, the man she had given a home and a job, had allegedly stolen $10,000 from her business. For Martha, this wasn't just about the money, though $10,000 was significant, especially during a pandemic. This was about the complete betrayal of the trust she had placed in someone she had worked so hard to help. She had risked everything to give Travis a second chance, and he had repaid her kindness with theft. Martha McKay, the woman who had forgiven murder, found that she could not forgive theft from someone she had treated as family. In what would prove to be a fatally decisive moment, she made the choice that would trigger the final tragedy. Martha fired Travis Lewis from his job and kicked him out of the bed and breakfast. The man who had lived at the Snowden house, the same house where he had committed double murder 24 years earlier, was being banished once again. But this time was different. In 1996, Travis had been a 16-year-old caught in the act of burglary. In 2020, he was a 39-year-old man who had tasted freedom, comfort, and acceptance. And now it was being taken away by the very woman who had given it to him. What went through Travis Lewis's mind in the days after Martha fired him? We can only imagine the toxic mixture of rage, entitlement, and familiarity with violence that must have been brewing in someone who had already proven capable of murder. Travis knew the Snowden house intimately, not just from working there for 2 years, but from having committed murder there 24 years earlier. He knew the layout, the routines, the vulnerabilities. He knew that Martha often worked alone, especially during the pandemic when business was slow. Most crucially, Travis Lewis knew that Martha McKay had a good heart. He knew she was someone who believed in redemption, who had taken extraordinary risks to help him. He probably calculated that she wouldn't expect violence from someone she had shown such kindness to. The same qualities that had driven Martha to forgive and help Travis were now making her the perfect victim. Her compassion had blinded her to the reality that some people cannot be saved, and that showing mercy to a killer might just allow them to kill again. This is where the story takes a turn that will make you question everything about forgiveness and second chances. What I'm about to tell you about Travis's return to the Snowden house will show you exactly how a killer's mind works when confronted with consequences. But first, I need to ask, do you think Martha should have seen this coming? Was she willfully blind to the danger, or was she just living her values? Because what happened next will make you reconsider everything you believe about redemption. Martha McKay is about to die because she believed in redemption. If you think her story matters, if you think people need to hear what blind forgiveness can cost, then prove it right now. Smash that subscribe button, not for entertainment, but because somewhere out there, someone is making the same dangerous choice Martha made. Don't let her death be meaningless. Subscribe and make sure her story saves the next person who thinks they can change a killer's heart. On a quiet evening in March 2020, with most of the world locked down due to the coronavirus pandemic, Travis Lewis made his way back to the Snowden house. This wasn't a random crime of opportunity. This was a calculated return to the scene where he had first killed, by someone who knew exactly what he was doing. Martha McKay was alone in the house, working on her business during the pandemic shutdown. She had no reason to expect that the man she had fired would return with violence on his mind. After all, she had shown him nothing but kindness for over 2 years. Travis broke into the Snowden house, the same house where he had committed double murder 24 years earlier. But this time, he wasn't a confused teenager caught in a burglary. This was a calculated attack by someone who felt betrayed by the very person who had saved him. Martha must have realized what was happening when she saw Travis in her house. The woman who had visited him in prison, advocated for his release, and given him a home, was now face to face with the reality of who he had always been. In her final moments, Martha managed to press her electronic panic button, the one thing that would ensure police would respond and that her death wouldn't go undiscovered. Even facing her killer, she was thinking clearly enough to summon help. Travis Lewis stabbed and bludgeoned Martha McKay to death in her bedroom. The woman who had forgiven him for murdering her mother and uncle was killed by the very person she had tried to save. Her compassion, her Buddhist beliefs, her faith in human redemption, none of it mattered to someone whose heart remained that of a killer. Police found Martha at the top of the stairs, near a bag filled with her belongings and the utility knife used in the attack. The scene told a story of violence and betrayal that defied comprehension. A woman murdered by someone she had treated as family. Stop right here, and let me ask you something that's going to make you angry and heartbroken at the same time. Martha McKay died because she believed in redemption, because she thought love could change a killer's heart. She died because she was good. What would you want people to remember about someone like Martha? Her naivety or her incredible capacity for forgiveness? Because what happened next shows that even killers sometimes face justice. But Travis Lewis's story wasn't over. As police responded to Martha's panic button alert, Travis fled the scene in a desperate attempt to escape justice once again. But this time, there would be number 28-year prison sentence, no opportunity for parole, no second chance at redemption. In a final act that seemed almost like cosmic justice, Travis Lewis jumped into Horseshoe Lake as deputies closed in on him. The same lake that gave the area its name became his final destination. Travis Lewis drowned in those dark waters, his body later recovered by authorities. The man who had killed 3 innocent people over 24 years would never stand trial for Martha's murder. His death in the lake ended his story, but it couldn't restore the lives he had taken or undo the trust he had shattered. The Snowden house, which had witnessed 3 murders across nearly a quarter century, finally fell silent. The cycle of violence that began with a teenage burglar's panic had ended with that same killer's death in the waters of Horseshoe Lake. Martha McKay's story forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about forgiveness, redemption, and human nature. She lived her Buddhist values to the fullest, showing a level of compassion that most of us couldn't imagine. And it cost her everything. Was Martha naive? Was she reckless with her own safety? Or was she simply living according to principles that most of us claim to believe, but would never have the courage to practice? These are questions without easy answers. Travis Lewis's story is equally complex. Here was someone given the ultimate second chance, not just freedom, but acceptance, employment, and housing from the family of his victims. Yet he chose violence again, proving that some people may be beyond redemption. The tragedy of the Snowden house spans 24 years and 3 lives. Sally Snowden McKay and Lee Baker died because they startled a teenage burglar. Martha McKay died because she believed that teenage burglar could become something better. All 3 died because Travis Lewis, at 16 and again at 39, chose violence over any other option. Martha's story doesn't diminish the value of forgiveness or second chances. Thousands of formerly incarcerated people successfully reintegrate into society every year. Her tragedy doesn't prove that redemption is impossible. It proves that discernment and boundaries are necessary even when showing mercy. If you or someone you know is considering extending help to someone with a violent past, remember Martha's story. Compassion doesn't require the elimination of common sense. Forgiveness doesn't mean the absence of appropriate precautions. Before I finish this tragic story, I want to ask you this. What do you think Martha McKay's legacy should be? Should she be remembered as a cautionary tale about the dangers of naive compassion, or as an inspiration for the power of forgiveness? And what do you think this case teaches us about the possibility of redemption versus the reality of human nature? I'll be reading every single comment because this story deserves serious reflection. The Snowden house stands empty now, a monument to the complexity of human nature and the dangerous intersection of mercy and evil. 3 good people died there, and 1 killer met his end in the nearby lake. Martha McKay chose forgiveness over hatred, mercy over vengeance, hope over despair. She paid the ultimate price for her compassion. But her story reminds us that the capacity for such forgiveness exists in the human heart, even when it encounters the kind of evil that cannot be redeemed. Until next time, this is Crime Echoes. Honor the victims, learn from their stories, and remember that sometimes the greatest tragedy comes from the purest intention.